8-bit joystick. For this video, I thought I would do a Game Boy Color showdown between the original Game Boy Color, the FunnyPlaying FPGBC, the new ModRetro Chromatic, and the Analogue Pocket. I'm going to be doing a boot up speed test, close zoom in on the screen to show you the side-by-side of the difference of the screen, and then I'll also do an audio comparison. And I have a cat. I'm going to be doing head-to-head American Tetris versus Japanese Tetris because these are one of my only games that I have duplicates of. The Chromatic is going to be going up against the Analogue Pocket. So the Analogue Pocket, you start by depressing the power button on the side, the Chromatic on the top. 1, 2, 3. Chromatic is the winner. This is Chromatic versus FunnyPlaying FPGBC. 1, 2, 3. Winner is Chromatic. FPGBC, not too far behind. Chromatic versus Nintendo Game Boy Color. And to do this, I have some lights off screen so you can actually see the Game Boy Color. And over here too. 1, 2, 3. Well, the winner is Chromatic. Well, Chromatic wins because it doesn't do the boot up screen. So, for boot up speed, the winner is Chromatic. Number 2 is the FunnyPlaying FPGBC. The Game Boy Color, very close behind that. And then the Analogue Pocket. So for the screen test, I'm going to be showing the introduction and title screen of Legend of Zelda DX. Here is the Game Boy Color with regular over-the-head lighting, and I have my window blinds open for what passes for a regular day here in Portland, Oregon. Now, that doesn't really seem fair because all these other ones are backlit. So I'm going to use my USB lights to try and get the best possible experience. So this is what the regular Game Boy Color looks like with a USB light a couple inches away from it. This is being recorded on my Pixel 6 phone at 60 frames a second, and I'm using a tripod. And like I said, I have these two lights about 4 inches away. This is what a baseline looks like. Alright, this is the ModRetro Chromatic at a 2x zoom. Now the ModRetro Chromatic does not use any kind of oversampling and is a one-to-one recreation of the Game Boy Color screen, but with a bright IPS display and accurate pixel spacing with negative spacing in between. It doesn't need to use any filters to create the Game Boy Color grid pattern. Here is the FunnyPlaying FPGBC at the 4X mode with simulated Game Boy grid. The FunnyPlaying FPGBC has a IPS screen that has 4 times the resolution of the Game Boy Color, and it actually has a simulated pixel grid using the 4X mode, so it turns off some pixels to simulate the grid. Here is the FunnyPlaying FPGBC with the simulated 4X Game Boy grid and zoomed in at 5X. Here's the Analogue Pocket in the Game Boy Color mode. The Analogue Pocket has an IPS display that is 10 times the original resolution of the Game Boy Color, and it can use all this extra pixels to do a simulated grid pattern using various filters. It has one that tries to be the closest recreation to the Game Boy Color, and then there's an enhanced mode, which is the same but has the brightness and saturation cranked up. Here it is zoomed in. It is zoomed in to 4X because the Analogue Pocket has a physically bigger screen. The Game Boy Color Plus mode, the regular Game Boy mode, and the Game Boy Color Plus mode. On the left is the FunnyPlaying FPGBC. On the right is the ModRetro Chromatic. So the ModRetro Chromatic is a little less hyper-saturated as the FunnyPlaying FPGBC. And it has actual Game Boy grid versus the simulated grid on the FunnyPlaying FPGBC. But both look quite good. Both are the original size of the Game Boy Color. The FPGBC, you can see a little bit of light bleed from around the borders, but it still looks quite good. And I have to hold the FunnyPlaying FPGBC to make sure that it is flat like that. On the left is the Analogue Pocket, and on the right is the ModRetro Chromatic. So if you care about a bigger screen, the Analogue Pocket is definitely the way to go. And if you want your colors to be really, really oversaturated, the Analogue Pocket is also the way to go. I just switched between the Game Boy Color Plus mode and the regular Game Boy Color mode on the Analogue Pocket. Chromatic is telling me it needs to have its batteries changed. Finally, Analogue Pocket versus FPGBC. Both have a really very saturated look to them. But if I have to compare the two, I think the FPGBC is probably a little bit more saturated. There's the Game Boy Color Plus mode. And here's a composite of all three FPGA systems, both zoomed out and zoomed in side by side. All the systems sounded great. Well, and then there is the act of charging them. The Analogue Pocket charges via USB-C. Bam. Built-in, non-user replaceable battery unless you have to open it up, but mostly non-replaceable. But you can replace it if you really need to. The FunnyPlaying FPGBC has a custom but absolutely easily replaceable battery charged via USB-C. So I don't know if there are replacement batteries on the market, but there probably will be. Enough people have these. Then Game Boy Color, powered by two rechargeable AA batteries, and the ModRetro Chromatic, powered by three. So the batteries that come with it are these cute little ModRetro batteries. However, these are non-rechargeable. Here is the battery connector for the optional battery pack, which I don't have it yet. So I have this smart charger that I got on Amazon and some Amazon batteries. And it is a little strange that the ModRetro requires 3 of them and not 4. What's that? I have a cat involved. So now, freshly recharged batteries in the Chromatic. That's right, Kitty. So what Kitty is saying is that it's sort of surprising that the Chromatic batteries, some love it, some dislike it, but it's one of the defining features is instead of having the quote-unquote spicy pillows, it has user-replaceable batteries. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe, it absolutely helps, and hit that like button. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome, play retro.